Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where we're talking about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of APB. So in this episode, we got this wonderful kind of little life commercial that Gideon kind of did that basically kind of, the fact is that the APB app is widespreading, which I'm surprised they didn't really comment. I mean, they commented on it some, over 300,000 people have downloaded it in Chicago or whatever. So I was kind of like, they didn't really bring it up. Like at the end of the episode, the first episode, they're like, holy crap, it's spreading like wildfire. A lot of people are downloading this app. But in this episode, he's basically calling the mayor out and being like, oh, these budget cuts that the mayor is kind of calling for and everything. It's like, my APB app will be there to kind of help you. It's like you be essentially kind of going over what he went over last episode, people being their eyes and ears, and that, things are different now. He even displays it by breaking into a store, stealing some candies, like handing it out to the kids and everything. And then obviously the 13th district reacts really quickly, and he's like, and Murphy's like, yo, what the hell are you doing, Giddy? And he's like, oh, look at that, record time, just kind of showing the point of like, oh, look how efficient everything is now because of the APB app. But it was a circumstance where it's like, Murphy herself is being like, you're here to change a lot of things, which is awesome. The cars, the guns, the uniforms, everything, that's awesome. But the fact of the matter is, don't change everything until you learn the system. Like, you don't really know how things work here. And the fact is that could kind of come back to bite you in the ass, which kind of does later on in the episode, but I'll kind of get to that. It's like, he's like, oh yeah, I'm going to learn about him. That's the whole point of learning. And then I can change it. But the thing is, not everything needs to be changed. Sure, things need to be refined and maybe create a better way for them. But I mean, it's kind of a situation where it's like you need a combination of old school versus new school. Like his technology, it's kind of something that was brought up last episode. It's kind of brought up this episode of like who they are, who the cops are, and their experiences and their know-how, because they know this world. He doesn't. He's kind of a new guy and he's going to newbie, so he doesn't really understand how things work. So for like example, because Murphy kind of explained it to him when the guy in this episode, which was kind of a bastard, how like basically he robbed a pharmacy and he was running and he was cut through a park and ended up running over a girl named Emily. Now, Murphy had to bring it up. Like, the fact is, we're different from criminals. Like, you think criminals are idiots. It's like, no, criminals are actually pretty smart. They've been in situations where they've run for cops for long enough that they kind of know how to avoid them and everything, how to get away. Just, they're not as dumb as you think. So you should never underestimate the criminals. Like, that's one key note that she tried to get in through his head in this episode. Also, the fact is, they can do whatever they want to. We're kind of held up to a different standard, and we're the good guys, so we have to do the right thing. They're the bad guys. They would do whatever they want to. Like, example with the whole Emily situation. A good guy wouldn't have drove through that park, but them being a bad guy just wanted to get away. They don't care who they hurt as long as they get away. So I did like that situation when they went to visit that dude at essentially it's kind of the car's connected to a racing garage. And basically like, oh, they help with street racing and stuff like that. And the dude that runs it, like Murphy's come across and it's like, I've been arresting you since I've originally first arrested you when you were like younger and everything. And she's like, all right, you don't got to worry about me locking you up. What I'm going to do is we're going to take a ride over to your mom's house. He's like, wait, what? He's like, yeah, I'm going to just tell your mom about all this illegal activity doing that. Also, you're connected to a car that ran over a little girl. It's like, yo, man, we ain't got, like, it didn't say this obviously, but me paraphrasing, yo, don't tell my mom. Legitimately as well that was. It's like it's one of those circumstances, like I said, like Murphy kind of brought it up last episode, like how she knows things better. She knows people, because this is an example of like, this is someone that she knows. So it's like, it's something Gideon brought up in this episode too. It's like, the fact of the matter is, you take Murphy, for example. She's a detective, but she's not wearing the same uniform. And he's like, that's a good thing, because the ones who kind of understand these streets and know them best are beat cops. And it's like, if you're a detective, you won't have that street level connection like you would if you're a beat cop, because it's like, oh, you spend your time patrolling and getting to know the people around the neighborhood. And it's like that there's that little bit of disconnection when you're a detective, because usually you're behind the desk. Brought up the fact that doing paperwork is like, don't worry guys, you will never have to do paperwork again, which everyone's kind of excited about. But it's kind of interesting, like it's kind of something Murphy herself, it kind of takes into place too, that the fact is, hey, just because I'm a detective doesn't change up who I am. It's like, this is what I've done. And then he's like, yo, I don't want you to change that up either. That you guys being beat cops is actually a good thing, because like I said, you know more stuff and you know how to handle the streets, you know how to handle people, because you know people. it's like I said, there's not that disconnection like you would with a detective. At least that's how I was viewing it. I felt really like we learned a little bit more about different people, like Brant. I'm probably mispronouncing his name, but he's the dude that had the dog Zingo. Kind of a reliable dog to kind of help them sniff out some evidence. And that dude, the bad guy in this episode, ended up blowing up his car, and the dog got massively hurt. Now, for Brad, it meant a lot to him. Because I looked up his name. I think his first name is Roderick, so I'll probably just call him by that. How I'll probably go by everyone from now on, because I made sure, like, I wanted to learn some of every character's names. Like, for example, Conrad, he's the sergeant, but now he's been upgraded to captain. I think the one that, because they brought it up in this episode, it's like, oh, certain dude quit because of Gideon worked there. He's like, oh, I don't want to work here until Gideon's going. I think that particular character is the actor who plays, I think it's Kevin Michaels. I could be 100% wrong. I probably most likely am. I can't remember. It's the actor who played Fusco on Person of Interest. So he's the only one that didn't pop up again. Not unless he's still there and he just wasn't in this episode, but I assume that he's the one. But nevertheless, you have Gideon promoting Conrad to captain. Conrad, who is played by Ernie Hudson, who obviously Ghostbusters, The Crow, a lot of stuff. Nevertheless, getting back to it, it's like Zingo was a dog that Brett had. Basically, he was part of he was in the military for and Zingo had basically helped him out and saved his life. So for him, it's like, it wasn't just a dog that got hurt, it was his partner through it all. And it just infuriated him that, he kind of got his revenge later on in the episode when he was the one that I was worried he was going to go too far, but granted, it's one of those situations like, hey, they have like taser guns, so it kind of works out in a favor where they don't have to worry about going too far. I'm guessing you hit someone enough. I'm sure that's probably something they designed so it's like it doesn't go too far, it doesn't hurt. There's non-lethal shocks. But essentially, I had a feeling, I was worried when they were actually going around, because it's like, oh, find a way around chasing after these guys. It's like, it's pretty hard to kind of maneuver through like alleyways and stuff, which, once again, bad guys can plow through anything because they don't care about civilians' lives. But, because they're cops and their cars are big, like at least big-ish, that the fact is that they will have to stop because they won't have their vehicles aren't small enough to kind of slip through, which it led to bikes getting made. Which the point I was making is that Roderick Brandt had wanted to beat him and his partner Tasha Goss. Like I said, it's definitely going to be confusing. I'll decide next week. I promise I will have a little more clear cut on it, whether I'm going to call someone by their first name or their last name. Because even with Murphy, I'm calling her Murphy, but I learned her name's Amelia, and I was like, I just naturally like the name Amelia because it's a very pretty name. So I'm like, maybe I'll just call her that. I don't know. For now, Murphy's fine. So, but nevertheless, it's a circumstance of like, oh, they're like, oh, we'll ride these bikes, because he wants to get revenge for Zingo, more so than the fact that there was a little girl hit, but that was still a big part. But for him, it was like his personal thing in it was the fact that his dog, his partner, kind of got hurt. So him and Tasha are riding the bikes. So, which those bikes are pretty awesome. Like, I appreciate bikes. I don't ride bikes. I'm not interested in getting bikes because in general, I'm not really that. I'm weird when it comes to vehicles. I really don't like driving. I don't like the thought of driving. It makes me uncomfortable. Definitely motorcycles make me uncomfortable, but I can appreciate how slick they look and all the time and effort put into it, especially because it's kind of a last minute thing where it's like, oh yeah, we literally started working on these 11 hours ago. Oh, and we're shipping them out. We're using them immediately. Oh, okay. I really appreciate the fact is that, kind of a situation, because I was wondering like how small this team was going to be. Is it just going to be like, oh yeah, like Ada and, Gideon? But what ended up being interesting is the fact is that Gideon brought on a dude named Pete. Now, Pete ended up fixing because basically the drone we saw last episode was just a prototype. Basically, they made a more full-fledged model of it, made some modifications to it and everything. And then Gideon's like, you did this a week ahead of schedule. He's like, well, you're kind of impatient. So I kind of had to kick it up. And he's like, you know what, Pete? you're not working anymore. You're coming. Well, Pete's most likely probably still working there, but it's like, hey, you're coming to work with me, kind of being a cop and everything. Which even Brent was like, wait, don't I know you? He's like, you ever seen wrestling? He's like, dude, you're Blockhead. It's like apparently he was kind of a big time wrestler, and then eventually went off, got his PhD and stuff like that, and kind of became a science dude. That's an interesting twist. I mean, it's like once certain things play out, you decide. I guess maybe it was an injury in the field. I mean, at work or whatever or something. Or maybe he just wanted to change a scenery, but to go down a science route. That was kind of interesting. Because I'm gonna be honest with you, doesn't look like a science dude. He looks like a dude that you'd see like as a bouncer or something. And it's like, okay, I see the wrestling aspect, but at the same time, it's like you can't judge a book by its cover because there's plenty of people who are like actually pretty smart. Like even if they seem dumb, or like because just preconceived notions that you, like myself, having, and I just was not expecting him. And I guess that's kind of the point, to make it look, because that's also to play into the character too. It's like he doesn't look like a really smart dude would. You kind of would make it hard to believe, but then you're like, just anyone applies himself, then obviously they can learn anything. I know I'm going like super far off here, but luckily, they were able to fetch the bad guy in him. Like, the whole point, I know, like, I kind of just went all over the place, and I do apologize for it. It's the fact is that, the reason why I brought that up was because, like, Brett, like I said, he wanted to be part of this and everything, so I was afraid he was kind of going to go a little rogue. Luckily, he didn't. He kind of backed down a little bit. I mean, it kind of worked out in the end, because initially, because of the injury his dog suffered, the vet or whatever, the person that was checking out, I don't know if it's necessarily a vet, but the medic or whatever checking out Zingo was like, yeah, it might be kind of, didn't get a chance to say it because Brent kind of shut him up really quickly, like, don't tell me, like, essentially kind of seems like it was leading to like, oh, it might be a situation where we need to put him down because he won't be able to work or whatever. So but luckily Gideon, because there's no way to save his leg because it was so damaged. But luckily Gideon had, like, there was some mechanical legs that they were working on and were able to give Zingo one. Obviously can't be in the field anymore, but now maybe he needs a good home, and so Brant is going to take him home. So little bits here and there. It's so interesting. I was in this episode we got a little more of a peek at Ada. I'll constantly be flipping back and forth on that because of the whole Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. situation. But we got a little more peek at her personality. Obviously, she's like super smart, which is not, like, no doubt about that. Because she's like, oh yeah, basically we can make more effective routes and stuff like that. And she's trying to explain stuff to Conrad, and he's like, okay, so break that down a little bit for. She's like, okay, it's like Pac-Man. It's like we want to get the ghost, but it kind of be nice if the ghost for standing still. He's like, do I look like I play video games? But kind of like, she's kind of a bit of a smart ass because they're like, oh, you can do that? Like, it's like, oh, wow, you can do this? And she's like, duh. Like, I'm like, I just like that. Like I said, little peeks at her personality like that. Like, because I guess, because even she's kind of the opposite of Gideon, because even Gideon doesn't really talk like that. He's just like, oh, yeah, this is complicated and stuff like that. But he doesn't, like, I don't know, like, obviously it's just like, I don't know how to phrase it. It's not like a bad, like, almost condescending type of thing. It's more of a, like, yeah, like, totally, I know how to do this. I'm, like, smart. Like, I don't know how to properly put it into words. I apologize for that. It was nice kind of seeing that peek into her personality. Another thing that popped up this episode was, the fact is that we had Gideon going over to Murphy's place, sitting down having dinner with her son, Mateo, and her mom. And just basically little things about him kind of coming in this episode. The fact is that, like, oh yeah, he's not that close with his dad. His dad wanted him to go to a particular college, and they kind of subsequently don't talk. I forgot where he said specifically his dad, like, he's from somewhere else, and his dad still lives there. Didn't bring up his mom in conversation, so I assume might not be around anymore. Kind of same thing with maybe Murphy's dad. Like, we've seen her mom and her son, not seen anything about her dad, so maybe that's something we'll kind of learn about them going forward. Obviously, got to learn a little bit more about everybody's personal lives. But I am curious to know, are we going to get a situation where we have Gideon getting into the field a lot more? Because obviously, like, he wanted to go along with Murphy and everything in this episode, which has its drawback because he saw that whole situation with Emily, and it broke his heart because, I mean, for one, it's a little girl, but I think it also probably made him think a little bit about his best friend that died last episode. So I'm sure that it touched that spot for him. So the final note I want to bring up in this episode is about the whole mayor situation. It definitely seemed like it was last episode, like, oh, the mayor is definitely being set up as the antagonist, and it seems even more so now because apparently, Murphy talks to her husband, Scott, and it's basically like, hey, the fact is, he's like, yo, I thought you were going to get that transfer out. She's like, nah, I'm not. I told you before, I'm not leaving the 13th. And he's like, the fact is some rich guy comes in, tries to run things, kind of acts like he's a cop. Because I was wondering what Scott's profession was, and it seems like he's a cop too. But it's like, not everyone's happy about what's going down there. The fact of the matter is, the mayor is putting together a task force to investigate the District 13 to kind of see if everything's really on the up and up. Because the fact is that basically everything Gideon's doing is kind of very unconventional. It's getting results, sure. I mean, but even then, it's still in its early infant stages. So it's kind of a situation like the mayor is looking for any opportunity to strike down Gideon. It's like he does anything wrong, he's ready to take him down. And even Murphy's kind of like, yo, why do you have such a problem with this? I mean, in particular, Scott's like, yo, you just got promoted after like a week of him being there. It's like, oh, I guess he's taking a special interest or something. It's like, oh, you think like you fake? That's why I got this promotion and stuff like that. It's like, almost wanted to say, screw you. It's like, man, that sucks. Is it kind of a situation of jealousy? It seems like it's a combination of unprofessionalism and jealousy. It's like jealousy as I would assume the ex-husband. I mean, maybe he's not, but I would assume that he is because of the fact is Mateo kind of has to bounce back and forth between their places. I'm sure that's probably why she possibly lives with her mom right now, because she's probably trying to get enough money so that she can pay for her own place for her and Mateo. But her hubby is like, you know what? The task force, I'm at the front of it, which is definitely going to complicate things because obviously we see he has a big problem with Gideon. Like I said, like the unprofessional aspect is because it's just like, yo, he doesn't look as Gideon. It's like, oh, he's coming in here pushing his weight around. He's just some rich dude. Like, it's like obviously there's the pure bureaucratic part of just any part of government and everything. Like you have to grease the wheels a little bit, the politics of things. And it's like to him, he probably doesn't like the politics of things, but he probably likes Gideon even less because it's like you're just some guy that doesn't know this world. So like I said, I didn't really think much about what Scott is and who he is or what he does for a profession, but it seems like since he's the head of the task force, I can only assume he is a cop. I mean, granted, for all I know, he could be like an ADA or something or a DA. And I mean, at least he's part of that world. Whatever the case may be, he's kind of leading the task force. So that's going to be interesting for Gideon going along because it's going to bring up questions like, oh, unprofessionalism between him and Murphy. Is like, oh, you're getting a little too close or anything like that. I mean, it doesn't seem like that seems to be the case. Obviously, he's taking an interest in Murphy because she was the first cop that he really kind of latched on and like, oh, you're a good cop. Which isn't to say he doesn't care about the other ones too, but it's just kind of like he sees the potential within her. He's like, oh, you're not. Oh, I don't really know any other detectives, and you don't really know any other billionaires to kind of run this thing. So I guess we're kind of stuck with each other. At least I guess all we can do is just continue to work together and do the best we can. Which is something that came up with Emily's mom. Because obviously earlier in the episode, Emily's mom brought up the fact that it's like, hey, at first we heard about your APB app and everything, and we felt safer and everything. It's like been a long time since I've ever felt that way. That's why me and Emily were in the park, because I feel like, oh man, things are changing, but obviously they're not changing. But Gideon kind of brings it up at the end of the episode, being like, the fact is, he can't say what happened to Emily might not happen. He can't guarantee it's like, oh, this won't happen again or something like that. But it's like, at the very least, he can try his best to make sure that it doesn't. So. And like I said, even though he's kind of like, you might look at him as like, oh, the spoiled rich kid. I mean, you can't really call him spoiled because he kind of worked, he definitely worked for what he's got, and like everything he's dishing out, he's, making by hand. So it's not like he doesn't know obviously he doesn't know what he's doing, but on the other hand, he does know what he's doing. It's a very confusing, gray area. It's going to be interesting to see him skate between like, knowing how to be a genius, but at the same time also just trying to balance that with trying to be a normal person. Like I said, it seems like something him and Ada are just definitely going to have to be a little more tactful about, like breaking stuff down and simplifying it for other people, and just, once you're on that certain level of genius or whatever, or being super smart, you kind of forget like, oh, you kind of have to break things down for other people. So it's definitely going to be interesting going forward. We kind of already, like I said, we brought up the whole fact about him and his family. Like I said, we're diving, obviously it seems like we're going to be diving heavily into Murphy's family, so her home life and everything. Which her mom is like, oh, I like him. And then Murphy's like, Mom, just stop. Which is like, I guess that was her way of being like, oh, maybe you can be with him. Obviously, you're not together with Scott anymore. So it's just kind of, it seems like probably one of those situations where, I'm sure that's any parent being like, oh, you're a certain age. Yeah, you have a child and everything. But, get out there, date a little bit, So It seems like that might be what she was alluding. Maybe not. We'll just have to wait and see. But really, that's all I want to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.